toxic masculinity.
Let's see here. So news article number 1. Let me go ahead and switch here. So let's see here. Milo Yiannopoulos says he's ex-gay, wants to rehabilitate through conversion therapy. Milo Yiannopoulos is no longer gay. He's a straight man, or he wants to be straight anyway. Take a look at this. A 5-ounce solid silver Apollo 11 coin just like this could be yours for free. It's Silver Month over at Noble Gold. The new administration is finally here. Oh, joy. And one of their big things is, as you know, climate change. And renewables need solar panels, electric circuits, and lots of other gizmos that used, you guessed it, silver. With a projected $2 trillion investment, there's never been a better time to profit from the insanity in Washington, D.C. with your silver IRA. Visit the Noble Gold website today at noblegoldinvestments.com. Now, Milo Yiannopoulos is known really for being very provocative, saying provocative things, doing provocative things, looking provocative. This is from New York Post, by the way. Let's read some of this, see what he has to say here. Right-wing provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos has come out as ex-gay, announcing that he would like to help rehabilitate what the media calls conversion therapy over the next decade, according to a report. The 36-year-old British political commentator, whose speeches and writings often ridicule political correctness, social justice, feminism, declared himself no longer gay and sodomy-free. Well done, Milo. He told LifeSite in an interview. Yiannopoulos, who once said that sex between 13-year-olds and older men can be life-affirming, told the outlet that he's now leading a daily consecration online to St. Joseph. Oh, very, very good. That whole thing about the young boys and men and stuff like that, sometimes, you're talking about stuff and you're just thinking through things and you're thinking about people's psychology and, what things mean and stuff like that. And that, I listened to that whole conversation that he had about the, young boys and being gay and all that kind of thing. And that's what it sounded like to me. It sounded like he was thinking through some ideas that he hadn't really fleshed out independently. And that was why he had, he said some things that were maybe thought of as horrible and whatever. But I don't think Milo is a bad guy. I don't think he should have been, his life should have been turned upside down as it was. He shouldn't have been banned from all the various platforms he was banned from. I think Milo Yiannopoulos is a force to be reckoned with. I love the guy. I think he's fantastic. There's always a danger in saying that you think somebody's great, right? There's always a danger. He could turn out to be a mass murderer, and then you have to say, oh, crap, I really misjudged that one. But I don't think so with Milo. He has his obvious flaws, but I've always liked what he had to say. He's very intelligent. He's very well informed on things. I would actually go so far as to say he's got, either close to or surpassing genius level intelligence. And so talking to him about things, I think, is very helpful. And listening to him debate people is very helpful. And if more people listen to Milo Yiannopoulos, I think we would be a better planet for it. Let's see here. When I used to kid that I only became gay to torment my mother, I wasn't entirely joking, he said. Of course, I was never wholly at home in the gay lifestyle, who could be, and only leaned heavily into it in public because it drove liberals crazy to see a handsome, charismatic, intelligent gay man riotously celebrating conservative principles. Handsome? Come on, Milo. No, he's a pretty handsome guy. I'm kidding. Yiannopoulos continued. That's not to say I don't throw myself enthusiastically into degeneracy of all kinds in my private life. I suppose I felt that's all I deserved. But that's the thing. There is a kind of theory. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that this is a theory that's out there in the public that people are talking about all the time. This is really more my theory. But it's a theory based on stuff that I've read about that seems to indicate that there is, if not a majority of gay men, there is at least a contingent of gay men, a certain subset of gay men who are gay because they hate themselves, right? And I had always kind of suspected this amongst certain men that I had met, right? Certain people you meet in life and you think, good Lord, this person just hates the world, right? There are people who feel like they've been dealt a bad hand and they lash out and they hate everybody. There's also people who think that they've been dealt a bad hand, or they're not a great, they hate themselves, and so they inflict punishment on themselves. And I first started thinking about this when I heard about cutting. I don't know if you guys know about cutting. This is something that was popular when I was younger. Certain kids that were depressed or had mental problems, they would cut themselves with like glass or different things, and they would make themselves bleed. And so you would sometimes meet people and they would have scars all along their arms where they would have cut themselves. Oh no, I've got the heater has come on suddenly. I got to turn that off. But I realized that there are certain people who do, and it's not just suicide, right? There's all kinds of physical harm that you could do to yourself if you hate yourself, or you have some kind of an issue where you're sad or you're depressed or something like that. And then I read about these people called bug chasers. And this is a phenomenon that happened in, I believe, San Francisco that I read about. And these gay men would go to gay brothels, and they would seek out the most gaunt, this is like in the 90s or early 2000s, go and seek out the sickliest looking men, and they try to sleep with them in order to catch AIDS. And the reason, catch HIV.
Believe it or not, there are actually some people who want to get the AIDS virus. The name on the street for some of these people is bug chasers, and the virus itself they call the gift.
I have one friend who is always like, I want to be like all you guys, you all have it, I don't. What's wrong with me? I want to go out there and get it.
They want to be in the in crowd.
It definitely is not a gift to get it. I would definitely be gifted if I didn't have it.
This is incredibly disturbing. Probably a lot of people don't know about it. Why do some people, and we stress this is a fringe group of people in the United States, why do they want HIV?
It's a multi-leveled reasons, and other people want to belong to a community.
They think there's this community out there that, and they, in order to belong. Do you think there's something in the AIDS education as it has been thus far that is sending out the wrong message?
Definitely. We've made it so positive to be positive.
In ads, in television, and the like.
Right.
And the reason they would do this is because they recognized that people who had AIDS were sort of like what would you call it? Like they were victims, right? They were victims. They were seen as victims. They were sort of coddled by society. So certain people who felt that they needed to be loved or needed attention or whatever it was, they would actually try to catch AIDS so that they could get more attention. That's how like messed up our culture had become, even at that time. I think it's now shifted toward being trans. I think trans is the new popular way of being a victim. So that's more popular now. But that's kind of what Milo's saying here. Milo Yiannopoulos is saying that, he felt that he only deserved this kind of, he was being a bit self-destructive. Is like he, to some degree, didn't like himself or something like that, and so he was being self-destructive. That's how I read this. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys read it differently. But this line, to me, is very telling. I suppose I felt that's all I deserved. And people like that are sometimes attention-seeking as well, and I don't think Milo Yiannopoulos would deny that he's an attention-seeking gentleman. He says, I'd love to say it was all an act and I've been straight this whole time, but even I don't have that kind of commitment to performance art. Talk about method acting. Asked about how he decided to become sodomy-free, Yiannopoulos said, 4 years ago, I gave an interview to America magazine which they declined to print. It's taken me a long time to live up to the claims I made in that interview, but I'm finally going to do it. Anyone who read me closely over the past decade must surely have seen this coming. I wasn't shy about dropping hints. In my New York Times bestselling book Dangerous, I heavily hinted, which I own actually, but I haven't read yet. I heavily hinted I might be coming out as straight in the future, he said. In my recent Stream of Consciousness Telegram feed, I've been even more explicit, stomach-churningly so, if the comments under my X days without sodomy post are anything to go by. It's interesting. It's interesting that he talks about conversion therapy here. Let me see where he talks about that. LifeSite reminded Yiannopoulos about his posts on social media site Parler of members of the Change movement with the caption, "Look at these beautiful souls, rid of their demons and cured of the sinful urges. Can you tell they've been saved? I can." Asked whether he could now add his picture to theirs, he said, "No, I don't suppose I'll ever be brave enough to declare it a thing of the past. I treat it like an addiction. You never stop being an alcoholic. As for the Change movement, I guess because they're Californian, they don't see how funny their website is, or maybe they're dirty non-doms who think non-doms. I just kind of figured out what that was. I never heard that before. All right, who think God loves you more the gayer you act, but I was slightly making fun of them with that caption. He said, someone really ought to tell them to use more heterosexual-looking photos on the website. I can share some tips. My followers have been giving me a crash course on all-American straight guy aesthetics, which apparently include growing a mullet and learning to drive a stick shift. Okay, so Yiannopoulos added, okay, this is the bit that I wanted to read. Over the next decade, I would like to help rehabilitate what the media calls conversion therapy. It does work, albeit not for everybody. As for my other aspirations and plans, well, no change. I've always considered abortion to be a preeminent moral horror of human history. I'll keep saying so even more loudly than before, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Oh, this is kind of funny. As far as his personal life, Yiannopoulos said of his husband, the guy I live with has been demoted to housemate, which hasn't been easy for either of us. It helps that I can still just about afford to keep him in Givenchy and a new Porsche every year. It could be worse for him, I guess. Oh, man, that's funny. All right, well, okay. But this conversion therapy thing, so I've actually seen quite a few videos on conversion therapy because they were claiming that Mike Pence was promoted conversion therapy, which he doesn't. But I wanted to see if conversion therapy was something that was something that was genuinely dangerous for people, because that's how it's portrayed in the media, right? That's what it's portrayed in the media. That's how it's portrayed in the news. Conversion therapy is dangerous. It's evil. It's horrible. And so I wanted to see if that was true or if that was just, some kind of leftist nonsense. So I started looking into it, and there are lots of stories of people who went into some kind of conversion therapy type thing, and they came out way better for it.
Isn't what you're doing effectively modern day quackery?
Certainly not. We want to be very safe. We want to be transparent. That's why we're open. We're not trying to hide anything.
And what's your aim?
We're aiming to support people who want to voluntarily move away from behaviors and feelings, if that's possible. We want to give them the option and preserve their rights and freedoms to do that.
But you do want them to change, don't you, in the way that you yourself believe you have changed, having had homosexual experiences in the past?
It's not about our agenda or a therapist's agenda. It's about listening to the client, dealing with whatever it is that they bring on the day, and standing with them as they work out the options that are appropriate for them.
My name is Stephen Black. I'm the director with First Stone Ministries. At age 16, I was completely embracing a gay identity. At about age 6, a friend of the family was babysitting me, set me up on his lap, and then began molesting me. And then at age 10, I was at the next door neighbor's house, and they had a visitor from out of town, probably in his mid-30s, followed me into the garage, hovered over the top of me, and began molesting me. My abuser began speaking into my ear how much that I wanted this to happen to me, because I was not wearing a shirt and I was just running around with jean cut-off shorts and flip-flops. His words sunk deep into my soul. I actually believed it and didn't tell anyone. And as I entered into puberty, I had bullies in junior high. Matter of fact, I had one bully that for an entire year, you sissy, queer, faggot, and then they followed me home and they beat me. And my dad was a Navy boxer. No real compassion or condolence, and so immediately, again, putting that place up in my heart where I hated my dad. Didn't want to have anything to do with him. 3 years into my journey, I met my wife. I've been married now for 27 years, and we have 3 adult children and 2 grandchildren.
My father and I had absolutely no bonding together at all. My feeling toward God is, where the heck were you at 5 and 6 years old when this stuff happened to me? Because I knew that it had to have been a contributing factor. I felt so used up and so old at the age of 21 or 22 years old. It was on the way back to New Jersey on an interstate that I pulled off, bawling my eyes out, finally in a place to surrender to Jesus Christ. I got involved in a small group. I got involved in men's group, which frankly was the last thing in the world any ex-gay guy wants to do, is get involved in a church men's group with a bunch of guys that don't know anything about where he's been. There is nothing I've engaged in my lifetime that has been harder than yielding what felt like an identity, what felt like inborn traits, did feel that way. Yielding that up to Christ, it is so much more than simply saying a prayer and you're fixed. It's a journey, and it's a battle, but it's well worth it.
I was far more connected to my mother, afraid of my father. He was very legalistic and very demeaning, very critical. It was very hard to please him. The rule of our home was you had to be perfect. You can't make mistakes. So I could never quite measure up to my father, always afraid of disappointing him. I finally met a man named Jeff Conrad. It was the first time I had heard anyone talk about emotional issues as they might relate to homosexuality, and everything he said was just so true. It just resonated inside me, where in the world I was being told that there was nothing I could do, I should just accept this. I was starting to hear from at least one other man that there were some answers and that he had made a change in his life. I had emotional wounds and emotional needs that had really generated the homosexual feelings. And it was my task then, with God's help, to discover those needs and wounds, to heal them, to meet the needs. And as I did, over time, I found those homosexual feelings decreasing and diminishing. It was not a quick fix. It took some time. I would say it probably took me anywhere from maybe around 5 years, give or take. I was a little stubborn, dragged my feet at times. But give or take, it was about that time I felt like I could solidly say that the homosexual feelings were a part of my past.
They say that they get it under control and they live a much happier life. A lot of people. And then occasionally you have these people who come out and they tell these horror stories about how horrible it was for them. Oh, hello, Aston. Oh, now that Valeria's not here, you want to be on camera, huh? So some kind of conversion therapy things that were, maybe damaged people a bit psychologically or something like that. I can imagine that that's possible. But obviously, Aston, what are you doing, buddy? Aston, come on. Oh, here we go. You can hang out here, but don't go over there, right? The people who are starting these conversion therapy things, they're not sitting there thinking, how do we ruin somebody's life? How do we damage this person psychologically? And I imagine there were tons of these kind of organizations before it was so demonized by the left. And, who knows how many of them worked really, really well, and how many of them were a bit harmful to people, and how many of them were kind of benign and neutral. Maybe they didn't do any good, maybe they didn't do any bad. But the problem was saying, this one did something, hurt me psychologically, which by the way, might have been a lie. A lot of these people that came out of conversion therapy, they may have come out and just didn't like it. And so they made up all this stuff about how they were psychologically damaged. My guess is that that's probably what happened, right? My guess is that some of these conversion therapies help people, some of them were benign, and then some of them, some of the people didn't like it, so they demonized them, said they were horrible and evil. And this became a trend in the media to talk about how conversion therapy was so awful and just traumatized people, was just the worst thing in the world. And so every kind of conversion therapy was demonized as bad. But the thing is, it's sort of like, any kind of scientific pursuit. You got to try a bunch of experiments and find out the ones that work, and then get rid of the ones that don't. Find out the techniques that work. And so that, I think, is was what was lost when the media went out and they just basically said all conversion therapy is bad. So I'm glad that Milo Yiannopoulos, says that it does work, it can work. And, it shouldn't be something that we just hate on all the time. That's been a position I've had for a very long time, because I do see that some people come out and they say that it worked for them, and I think that's great. If you're gay not because you're born that way, which is what the media always says, everybody's born that way, which I don't think is true at all. If you're not born that way and you're just acting that way because of some kind of compulsion, maybe a mental illness, maybe some other trauma in your life, something like that, and maybe you're being self-destructive like Milo seems to be, then certainly some kind of therapy would indeed help you, and people should encourage that, right? The left's always talking about how we need to stop, we need to make mental health something that we can all talk about freely, and we shouldn't be ashamed of it and that sort of thing. And yet they pretend that there's no possibility that any gay person or any trans person could ever be suffering from mental illness, and that's why they're acting out in the way that they are. Which is ridiculous. So Anyway, that's it for that story. Milo Yiannopoulos is now straight-ish, and I love the guy. I think he's great. Aston, what are you doing, buddy?
Toxic Masculinity. Weekdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.